14 years ago, Renault didn't just launch a car, they launched a whole segment. The Duster was the one that started it all, the mid-size SUV segment as we know it today. And well, 14 years later, this is entrant number 14 into the long list of lineup that we have. The Duster has a lot of hype around it because of the strong brand name it has. We've done so much with it in the past, driven through India, driven outside India twice, all the way to Paris in fact. So we definitely know that the hype is real. Can it match it? That is the question. Now, a USP of the Duster, even when it was launched back in the day, was the way it looked. It had a lot of muscle, aggression, it looked butch, and well, the new one has carried forward that ethos. Of course, it's a lot more angular now. You have a lot of lines, a lot of creases, but it still is very, very aggressive, and it has that stance that we all love. First up front, you've got LED headlamps, nice, sleek looking, not really shouty. That's a really good touch. You've got the Duster badging instead of the Renault badging that you see abroad. That is a bold move. For Renault to not have even their logo in the front of the car and have Duster just tells you how strong the brand is in India. On the bonnet, you have these nice big power lines that again add a lot more muscle. You've got this butch cladding down, low down as well. LED fog lamps, really low on the bumper, and overall it has that aggressive look, that road presence that we all like. Over to the side, you've got 18-inch wheels with 55 section tires. That adds another layer of cushioning because ride quality is so important on a Duster. Coming to the back, 212 mm of ground clearance. Now that is absolutely massive, and it is the best. If you want to take on our roads, this is what you need. Wheelbase hasn't really grown, and the overall dimensions of the car haven't grown exponentially. It just swelled up a little bit. It's not massively different when it comes to wheelbase and length compared to the older Duster, and the silhouette also is more or less the same. You can identify it as a Duster. The other thing, of course, are roof rails. Now these are functional roof rails, but sadly in India, getting anything on the roof rails is illegal. So a roof box or a roof carrier is not really possible. So a bit of a waste on the top right here. But then you come over to the rear. Again, LED tail lamps that are connected by a DRL. Lots of cladding that gives it that tough look. And yes, you've got the Renault badging here with the Duster badging. What's also really nice is an electric tailgate. That is of course a premium feature, and just goes to show that Renault wants the Duster to be a premium SUV now. No longer what it was earlier, bare basic, bare bones. That's not going to be the case. Massive boot space, 518 liters if you measure up to the partial shelf, but over 700 liters if you take this away. That is big on practicality. So boot space clearly prioritized, but what has that done to the back seat? Let's find out. Now it definitely looks the part, but Renault also has a special launch edition of the Duster, which you see here in the green, that gets some subtle exclusive bits like the neon green highlights on the Duster badge up front, blacked out wheels compared to the dual tone ones on the iconic variant, and Duster lettering on the roof rails like the older model. And because they didn't really compromise on boot space, they had to trade in a bit of that rear seat experience. Now, rear seat space was never really a Duster strong point, and with this new one, things are not too different. Of course, it's better than before, so I have a decent amount of knee room. Under thigh support is good as well. The width is not too bad, and headroom. Now, despite having a panoramic sunroof, I have a good amount of headroom, and that's because they have actually raised the roof height 40 mm more, so I have a bit more space above my head, and that I think is quite nice for them to make substantial changes to the sheet metal. That just goes to show that they really wanted to get things right. Now in the back seat, like I mentioned, space is not great, but it's not bad either. I can definitely sit here for long hours. The recline is not too upright, it's at a decent angle. I would have liked a one-step recline extra. Sacrifice a little bit of that boot space, I would have been okay, because that would have given me a lot more comfort. But still, even as things stand, it's not too bad. I have a center armrest, 2 cup holders, some space to keep my phone, 2 AC vents in the center with 2 Type-C ports. However, what I would have liked are of course sun blinds. On a hot day, this long window can get quite toasty. Despite a slightly raised window line, you still get large windows and an airy feel, something which was a highlight on the old Duster too. And of course, the big panoramic sunroof that lets in so much light just opens up the cabin, and that of course is a brilliantly premium feature. For passengers in the middle, of course, it's gonna be a bit of a compromise because you have a decent amount of tunnel and the base is a bit raised. However, headroom still is not a problem, and definitely if you're a medium-sized adult, you won't have a problem back here. But yes, not the best backseat experience, primarily because of legroom and sun blinds. Those two things would have really solved the problem. Now on the outside it might resemble the Duster with the silhouette and whatnot, but on the inside it is a completely different car. It's a completely modern cabin and it is better than the version sold abroad, and that is because this Duster is built on Renault's RGMP platform, not the CMF-B which is sold abroad. That means the E&E, the electricals and the electronics are completely new, which means all the guttings basically are brand new, and it is now Google powered, which means it's fast and responsive. You have Google Maps as standard navigation, which is a big relief, and of course you have the App Store in there as well. Now we'll get to the touchscreen in a bit. I just want to appreciate what I'm seeing here because the cabin quality and the materials are very, very good. You've got this carbon fiber, I mean of course fake carbon fiber plate right here, the faux metal along with the brushed plastic. You've got some green that is meshed with fluorescent stitching, and it all just looks very fresh and very new age. A break away from the tans and greys that you see mostly on cars. Then the steering, angular, really nice and chunky to hold, grippy as well. Physical tactile buttons, piano black, yes, catches a lot of fingerprints and marks, but it's still okay. You still have tactile buttons that are really nice, well fit, they don't move about and don't feel low rent at all. Then you have the instrument cluster, which is all digital. Again, resolution is fantastic. You can have your Google Maps on here as well in a wide format. So very, very convenient in that aspect. However, vital information needs to be toggled through. So you have to use these set of buttons to just basically go through menus and see exactly where is what. And simple tasks like finding your RPM gauge would require you to fiddle around with this button if you're on your map. So that I think is a bit non-intuitive. If they would have just made it easier, one single button to change the themes, then that would have been a lot nicer. Also, you don't have those classical round dials. I mean, if you're giving a customizable theme, one extra layer wouldn't have made a difference and would have satisfied those old school dial lovers. I personally am a big fan of needles. Even if they are digital, I don't mind them. That look is just so classic. However, that is something we miss here. Then coming to the touchscreen, now it's Google powered, so it's very fast, very responsive, and like I mentioned, all your apps in here as well. Again, UX UI is something that is not exactly intuitive, and it will take some time for you to get used to how this whole thing works. It's not a simple task. Thankfully, HVAC gets a physical set of controls. That I think is a big, big win for Renault, because obviously nowadays everything is crammed in the screen and it gets pretty annoying. You do have controls for AC in the screen, but your basic functions are all here, which is a great thing. Of course, for the media also, you'd imagine them to be on the steering wheel for the volume. That's not the case. Like the old Duster, you have a special stalk right here that controls your media, your volume, and your toggle for forward and backward. And overall, the cabin feels really nice and fresh. Then we come to the seat. Now the seat support is excellent. Cushioning is very good. They are broad and contoured as well. And of course, electrically adjustable and ventilated. And ventilation that works exceptionally well. Today is a particularly hot day and these were absolutely flying. So that I think is going to be a big win. Then you have practicality. You have a big cubby hole right here, which you can separate and use it as a cup holder. You have this cover for it, which has a rubberized mat as well. So if you keep your phone here, it's not really going to move about. You've got your wireless charger down here along with two Type-C ports, and it is cooled. So even if you keep your phone here for long, it's not going to heat up extensively, which is a great touch. A small little cubby hole for loose items, and overall a very practical cabin, ergonomically very well sorted. You've got good space in the footwell for a dead pedal as well. And basically it's just such a big jump from what the Duster was before that I just can't relate anything to it anymore. 360-degree camera, not the best in terms of resolution. I would have liked it to be a bit better in terms of quality. That is something that is a bit of a gripe for me. You've got drive modes, settings, screens, everything is really, really good. And then you have the steeply raked windshield. Now this might not be a problem for everyone, but if you're a tall guy, you're basically going to be here. This is the lowest seat height, by the way, and then the IRVM is right in your vision. So if people are coming from the left, then you are going to be adjusting yourself a little bit. This is for the tall guys only, otherwise it's not going to be a bit of a problem. Thick A-pillars as well, so you might need to get your head around that for some really tight spaces. But overall, you can see the end of the bonnet, you can see the lines very clearly, and it's very easy to judge this car even in city traffic. Full marks then on the interior. It is something that you really didn't expect from Renault, but they have delivered and it can play with the big boys in the segment. Feature-wise, you get a good amount of kit to challenge rivals. However, a better allocation of the features throughout the range would have given it an extra edge. Mid or second-to-top variant should have been equipped with ventilated seats or leatherette upholstery to add some more premiumness. However, what's also new along with the design and interior is the powertrain. The Duster gets three engine options between a 1-liter turbo petrol unit with 100 horsepower and a 6-speed manual gearbox, a 160 horsepower 1.3-liter turbo petrol engine with a 6-speed manual and 6-speed DCT, and a 1.8-liter strong hybrid powertrain that will be launching in Diwali this year. Interestingly, 91% of the bookings for the new Duster are for the 1.3-liter engine, so that is the one we have with us.
You are calling me down to the river again. I've got doubts in my hair and I wish I could feel your ghost in these winds.
Well, we've seen the outside, seen the inside, but after years of anticipation, we are finally behind the wheel of the all-new Duster. And honestly, I've got a special connect with this car. Like I mentioned, we've done so much with it in the past. I've actually driven one all the way to Paris, so the Duster name definitely means a lot more to me than to probably anyone else out here. However, I'm going to be completely objective. It's an all-new car, all-new engine, new look, new interiors, new tech. So how does it feel? Can it compete in the absolutely fierce mid-size SUV segment that has been ruled by the Creta ever since it came out? And we've got the DCT fares because I think that's going to be the obvious choice. The more sold car is going to be the automatic. Why not? You have all that convenience with all that performance. So let's start with refinement, which is excellent. Startup, there is absolutely no vibration in the cabin, on the steering, in the seats, nothing. NVH levels are very good as well, and even as you gain speed and gain momentum, it's not like you hear the engine. The cabin insulation is very, very good, so big ups when it comes to the engine refinement. Then we have the new gearbox, the 6-speed DCT. Now it's a wet clutch, so it's not as rapid when it comes to response time as compared to a DSG from Skoda and Volkswagen, but it is more on the torque converter side, and that means you get an unbelievable amount of smoothness within the shift. You just don't realize when the car goes from second to third, third to fourth. It is very, very seamless, and that of course is a lot more comfortable in the city when you're in traffic, ambling about. City speeds, this thing is very good. And the other thing that is also very good are the paddle shifters. Now usually with mid-size SUVs, you don't have much response, you don't have much control. We've seen that with the N-Line, definitely with the Sierra, but on the Duster, the paddle shifters are a lot more responsive. They give you a lot better control in comparison to the other SUVs. And I think when you're in hilly regions like these, you appreciate that control a lot more. It adds a layer of engagement for the driving experience as well. So overall, gearbox performance, quite positive. But then the big talking point is the engine performance. 160 horsepower and 280 Nm, which is the most amount of torque you can get in this segment. But what does that mean? Honestly, low down in the bottom half of the rev range, you do feel a bit of that turbo lag. It's not as responsive, it doesn't shoot off the line, and it takes a little while longer until it reaches that 2300 RPM. Then it starts picking up, and after 2500 is where you feel that turbo surge immediately. Now this is not that big of an issue on the DCT because the gearbox ensures that you stay within the power band at all times. It will downshift if needed. It won't really let you go too low in the rev range. So in the DCT you won't feel that as much, but on the manual you do feel that, and I'll tell you a bit more once we switch cars. But for now, this automatic is very, very impressive, and it's not like it's sluggish at all. Even though you have a little bit of hesitance in the start of the rev range, it picks up pace very well, and is actually quite quick. The drive modes only include normal and eco, but a sport mode would have upped the performance a tad bit more. In our preliminary testing, the DCT clocked in 10.4 seconds, while the manual took 10.8 seconds in a 0 to 100 kph stint. Now, while we are on the topic of performance, let's take a look at the manual before getting to other aspects. Now, the 6-speed DCT is all well and good, very convenient in the city, and you get your paddle shifters. But when you're on roads like these, and if you're a real purist, nothing really beats the control you get with 3 pedals. A 6-speed manual gearbox and an empty tarmac guard section. That is just bliss for any driver. 160 horsepower as well and 280 Nm. So all that torque is a lot better controlled. And speaking of just how easy the gearbox is to use, the clutch is light. It's got a consistent bite point, so you know exactly where it's engaging. It's not abrupt, so you don't end up with jerky shifts or bogging the car down in traffic. It's very tractable as well. You can take 20, 17 kph speed breakers in 3rd gear and it's not going to shudder or bog. And what's also really nice is that the shifts are very precise. It's a well gated gearbox, so 2nd to 3rd is not a problem. You know exactly when the gears slot in, and that's quite nice. However, if you are not in the right gear, that is when you struggle with this gearbox, because it is tall geared. You need to be in that power band at all times, like a 2300 RPM. After that is when you get a bit of surge. It'll amble around fine, it's not going to bog down. But if you are at a low speed, low RPM, then you will need to be in the right gear. Otherwise, you're not going to get that surge. And you notice that coming out of corners, when you demand that extra bit of grunt, it's just not there. And then you have to downshift, get in that power band, and then things are a lot better. So if you are to drive this car enthusiastically, you will need to ring the engine a bit harder and keep it in that sweet spot. A special mention also to the actual gear lever. It's nice textured, the right size as well, and it slots in very easily, and that makes your job a lot more fun and engaging. Now, while this turbo petrol engine is very good, torquey, good power as well, you can't help but miss a diesel. That long-legged nature, especially with the Duster name, that 1.5 K9K was such a bulletproof engine. And on long trips, it really makes light work of munching down the miles. I know Renault doesn't really have any fixed plans of getting a diesel because they have a hybrid on the way. And a strong hybrid is a diesel replacement in these times. But that low-end grunt, that effortlessness, that cruising nature that a diesel gets is simply unmatched. And I'm pretty sure even though it's not a big market, there is still a significant market for a diesel. People, especially with mid-size SUVs, cars like these that are meant to be traveled in, big boot space, lots of comfort, you are bound to do a lot of road trips. So having a diesel would definitely be an advantage, even though it's nowhere on the cards for now. Now, while the engine performance is quite nice, what's also quite nice is the handling. The steering, of course, is light, convenient. Unlike the hydraulic unit on the older Duster, there is no real kickback or inconsistencies. However, it doesn't really have the sharpness that you get with a Kushaq or even a Taygun. But more than the steering, what is impressive is the body control. Now, when we were at the unveil of the Duster, Renault mentioned that a lot of the R&D happened at MMRT, the Madras Motor Racetrack. And it is a bit weird because you don't really take a mid-size SUV to a racetrack, but they did. And I'm pretty sure, given how this thing is handling its weight and managing, that they have come out with a few learnings. The body control is impressive and there is negligible body roll in tight corners. It also gets drive modes between normal and eco, along with an individual mode that can configure the steering weight as well. It adds heft for those who want a bit more weight around the corners, but overall it remains a light steering. You pair that with the control you get from the paddle shifters, the extra bit of torque you have with the engine, and it definitely becomes an enjoyable experience. Now, yes, the handling is definitely impressive, the steering is convenient and light, but where the Duster made its mark was the ride comfort, and with this new one, thankfully they've retained that. Over a bad and broken section, you just don't flinch. This car does exactly what you expect a Duster to do, and that is just go over a really rough section without letting anything on the inside. If you take the same patch of road with some other midsize SUV, you will definitely hear a lot more inside the cabin, thuds, rattles, the jolts that will be felt. Not with the Duster. This thing just steamrolls. Now, ride quality, of course, was peak Duster territory back in the day, but since then, competition has stepped up, and you now have the Tata Sierra, which is absolutely phenomenal, especially with the smaller sized wheels. The low speed bump absorption on the Sierra, I think, is still a bit better, but if I had to put my money, I would definitely go with the Duster because of just how effortless and confident it feels over a really bad section. And it's not just the bump absorption, even the stability in the corners. The car doesn't flex too much. You don't roll over in your seat. It's nice and stable. And these are all hallmarks of a very good suspension setup. As we know, the new Duster also gets level 2 ADAS. Thankfully, it is an ADAS system that can be switched off manually. So if you're not in ideal ADAS friendly situations, you can just turn it off. But if you leave it on, calibration is not too bad. It won't abruptly stop. It detects objects fairly easily, and it has a good amount of buffer as well. So unless you are really reckless, it's not going to intervene, which I think is quite nice. But the best part is the fact that you can manually switch it off and on as per your liking. The Duster is launched at an introductory price of 10.29 lakh rupees for those who opt for the R Pass. The R Pass gets you advantages like special introductory price, priority delivery, a chance to see the Duster being made at the factory, and Gang of Dusters merchandise. For this, you will have to pre-book the Duster for 21,000 rupees before the 31st of March. Post that, the following will be the prices. Renault is also introducing a new subscription program with the Duster which will commence from April 1st. The plan will not require a down payment and will bundle on-road costs and servicing into a single monthly fee. Customers will be able to choose from multiple tenure and mileage options, and at the end of the term, they can extend the subscription, return the vehicle, or simply buy it. The Duster will also come with a warranty of up to 7 years or 1,50,000 kilometers. They've taken their time, but Renault has brought in the Duster well armed and ready to play with the top dogs in the mid-size SUV segment. The big question was, does it justify the hype and has it been worth the wait? And the answer is a resounding yes. It ticks most boxes you expect from a Duster: the boot styling, new age interior, and the elevated driving experience thanks to the engine, and it is genuinely a well-built car that will be at home on our roads. The diesel is missed, and maybe a bit more space in the rear would have heightened its appeal, but even as is, the new Duster will surely make the Sierra and Creta stop in their paths and take notice.